just as a fan of comics and storytelling in general, like those are very rewarding moments when you see something sort of emerge organically from a story, and those are like one of our big challenges is to sort of make it seem what you're doing seem realistic or or seem and that's like one like that is sort of the rhythm of life, that things sort of creep in almost in your peripheral vision and then become very vitally important.
Sure. I mean, what happens in the work, you want it to be given the impression that it was well planned, but the fact is that there is a lot of improvisation that goes on. And I know that, I mean, I work this similar style as you do, in that since I have a skeleton of a plot that I'm adhering to, but at the same time I allow myself room to improvise, to add on, to go off on different paths, as long as what I'm doing is staying true to the characters and true to the plot, because it would be boring otherwise.
Right.
It would just be boring.
And if it's boring, you're going to stop and not finish.
Right. Or go on in drudgery, and it will read uninspired.
It loses its vitality. Like a reader can see that.
Right.
Reader can see that. You've seen that happen for people you're fans of, or things you've read. You've seen that happen, and that's like the other thing you don't realize coming in is that it's like running a marathon, and you do need to make it as easy on yourself as not easy on yourself, like letting yourself off easy, but you're going to be spending long years and hard work doing this, so you need to make sure that you're doing everything you can to make this a fascinating, enjoyable experience for yourself, in addition to your readers.
Right, and I think that you're absolutely right. The reader can sense when they're reading something that is uninspired,
or they're disengaged,
or done in drudgery. And I think the reader can also sense when the artist is doing something that feels that's real inspired or is meaningful to the curator. I think the reader can sense that, and so the more you can do that, the better. Obviously, it's going to be for you and your reader.
Have any of you? I mean, if this is too personal, maybe nobody has to answer it. But have any of you had moments like that within things that you've worked on, where you've had maybe, even if it were just like a day where it was murder, or like have you had maybe like a longer stretch of time, or has there ever been a point where it became bad for some reason, became like emotionally bad for you working on it, and you sort of saw it showing through?
I don't know about emotionally bad, but there's times where when you're like decompressing a moment and you're having to draw the same panel structure for multiple. This book here, I started out doing an experiment. It's 3 horizontal panels per page, which is really fun at the beginning, because it's like, oh yeah, widescreen, it's like a movie. And then by page 80, it's like, I would totally have been done with this book like 40 pages ago. It's like, I'm still enjoying drawing this format, but it's like, I have so many more pages to finish. I'm doing 3 panels per page, but I tried not to let any sort of drudgery, like you were saying, because you can, it does shine through.
Well, on a related note, I can say that I've had bad situations in my life that I utilize autobiographically in my work.
Outside of the drawing table?
Yes. For example, I used to have well, until last year, I had a really crappy cubicle job with a boss who was like evil, okay? And I would sit in these boring IT meetings and write down all the dialogue that was being said there, and then I utilized that dialogue as a building of my character. And that's kind of cathartic, to use dialogue straight from these meetings and use it as the.
Did I see that?
Sure.
The people who are like fans of my comics, they're the beneficiaries of my horrible day job, because the horrible day job that I had to work at made it so that when I came home, I couldn't wait to get into comics, and I was just like bursting with energy to just work on my and I think that. I mean, this like it's tough for me to admit this, but I'm hoping to sort of overcome this. But I think the work that I'm done with my day job now. But I think the work that I did while I had a day job had a little more vitality and a little more urgency than my work does right now, just because it was almost a matter of survival for me to work on this comic, and I think it showed. And I'm not feeling that. I'm definitely enjoying the drawing process and the writing process a lot more now, because I can sort of, instead of trying to, escape and cram it into, whatever time I have, I can sort of let things organically. So I'm enjoying it more, but I just hope that, my work doesn't lose, that sense of urgency that it had.
Yeah. because the possibility of getting home to be able to draw in the evening, like, gave you impetus to get through the day.
Right, right. And the fact that, okay, now it's my time. And now I can really, like, because otherwise, either, maybe there's something on TV, or it's a nice day out, or everybody's getting together, for a party or something,
For me, it was almost like the opposite of that. Because the last several months, I've had the light at the end of the tunnel visible. And it's like, I work 30 hours a week at a crappy job at Target. And by the end of the work week, I'm like, oh my God, I still have to do a comic tonight. Can't wait till this is finished.
Yeah, that people I've talked to, that seems to be the more typical experience. Like they kind of say to me like, oh, that I can't relate to that at all. Like I was talking, but yeah, that is like where you're just physically drained at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly.
And I imagine like a job at Target, you're like on your feet for it. But like I was lucky enough to like I say, oh, I hate this job, but I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people that only wish they had like the day job I had, where I get to sit in a chair at least all day. So when I come home, I wasn't physically, I was maybe mentally drained, but I wasn't physically drained.
Well, actually, on a related note, one of the impetuses that got me to finally quit my job was the fact that where I was working was they wanted me to start using my art for their boring projects. Yeah. And that was like the last straw. It's like, no, you're not using my art for this. I'm only going to draw what I wanted to write and draw. And that was like the straw,
When it starts being a job, when it starts feeling like a job. Like, this is what I do. That's not my job.
Right. Exactly. I want to keep that pure.
That's why I think like working on multiple. I mean one project is pretty hard. But working on multiple projects almost helps that way too, because you have sort of like when you're not in the mood to be working on this one, you can sort of work on the other.
Yeah, it's fun to juggle several things like that, and it keeps it interesting.
Yeah, it's been great ever since I finished this, because now instead of coming home and doing a comic every night after Target, I come home and draw something just for fun that I don't have to put up for anybody. La, 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 la.
Sort of fall back in love with drawing.
Exactly, it's given me a lot more. I remember what it's like to draw for leisure again. Not that I didn't have, enjoy doing my comic for 3.5 years, but yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is different if you're, constantly updating and have an audience expecting it.
When you're committed to a project of that scope, it really does requires great discipline. And I mean, I wouldn't say that honestly when I'm doing my work, I wouldn't say there's any drudgery in it, but there is a sense of I'd rather be doing something else right this minute, but I'm going to force myself to sit down and do this. And once I start doing it, then I'm like,
you're on fire.
Yeah, then I'm on fire. But it's like the writer Thomas Wolfe said, the hardest thing of doing anything is starting it.
Yeah.
Once you start, you're fine. But sometimes it's like a force of will to force yourself to start it.
Exactly.
These are the days where it's like it takes you forever to start, and the next thing you know, you've been drawing for 8 hours. You're starving to death. It's like 3 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, I forgot to eat.
Like you stand up to go wash my brushes, and I'm about to pass out because I'm so damn hungry.
Yeah.
When you forget to eat or
your legs are all
forget to
seized up
sleep,
Yeah.
like that's how you know that what you're doing is something you really love. Like
right.
It's really worth your time.
Or you're mentally ill and you.
Right. Yeah. It could be a cry for help. Could be. Have any of you seen like in the time that from when you started till now that your style has changed? It has changed, whether it's just like your surface style or your writing style, or like have you seen that? And do you think that that's helped your work or harmed your work in any way?
Oh yes, all of the above.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely changed a lot to the point where I almost wish I could have made it a different series so I could say, yeah, start with issue 13, which is actually the new number 1, and then because I really like this, and then issue 1 looks kind of amateurish to me now. I mean, it's still a good comic. It's just like, oh God, so long ago I drew this. I don't even like looking at it. And I've actually, because I'm doing 3,000 pages, issue 1 takes place sort of in the middle of the chronology of the story, so eventually it's going to come back to it.